We are on a public bus, now driving through the narrow streets of Santa Barbara, our hometown on this island. Today, we are taking the public bus from Santa Barbara to the city of Ponta Delgada, of course. We are a group of 8 people now, as our children and friends arrived yesterday, and we have chosen to treat them all to an all-day excursion to get their vacation off to a rocking start. This is the day that we have scheduled to take them on an excursion from Ponta Delgada to Finish. It is now 8 a.m. in the morning, and we are all aboard the bus, headed to Ponta Delgada to connect with our excursion vehicle on the waterfront there. There are a few reasons that we have chosen to take the public bus to the city as opposed to the convenience of getting a couple of taxi cabs. Firstly, we all can be together on the bus and arrive together to connect to our excursion vehicle. Secondly, many people have suggested to us that although the new highway, referred locally as the Via Rápida, is much more convenient in terms of speed and time, the trip has lost much of its charm and character. After all, a highway is a highway, you know? People finally recall the lost pleasures of traveling the winding and narrow roads that pass through the little towns, farms, and fields along the way. We thought it would be nice to treat our family to that lost charm, to travel as many of the local people travel, to give our family a real taste of this place. Plus, to be honest, we find this mode of travel to be a bit of a pleasure ourselves, more relaxing to be sure. Thirdly, I'm taking this opportunity to videotape the route to give you a taste of the real flavor of this place and to show you a lie of the land, to show you what travel was like prior to construction of the modern highways, the Via Rápida. Lastly, people who grew up on this island and have moved abroad, to Canada for example, may appreciate the nostalgia factor, seeing the scenery, the towns, the farms, the green fields that they will recognize from their earlier years in this place. Hello, we are Kevin and Lucy, and we are Cruise Adventures. We are vacationing in the Azores on the island of Sao Miguel. Come for a ride with us to see the charm of the place you would miss if you take the highway, the Via Rápida. So Mr. Driver, roll those wheels. There's an excursion waiting for us all in Ponta Delgada. Lucy has drawn my attention to the fountain in the concrete wall up ahead. It has just now caused her to have a recollection of her childhood memories growing up here in Santa Barbara. She recalls when the men would guide the cows through the roadways, moving them from one field to another to graze on the grass. They would allow them to stop at this place to drink water from the free-flowing fountain here. Likely you have noticed how narrow the roads are here, as we have been driving through Santa Barbara in this big bus, similar size as a normal transit bus that you might be familiar with back in North America. To say the least, these drivers are very skillful in their maneuvering the narrow streets and for sure have mastered well the virtue of patience. They so often have to wait for other vehicles, pedestrians, and other obstacles to clear the way in order for them to get through the narrow streets that are sometimes blocked by delivery trucks, oncoming traffic, or other blockages. You've already witnessed a little bit of that a few minutes ago as we've been traveling up the hill going through Santa Barbara. For the most part, narrow roadways going through these towns are very reminiscent of narrow roadways in old European cities. They've gone unchanged since the automotive age, when horse and carriage were the only traffic to worry about. Take note that houses that line these narrow streets have been very modernized since earlier times, with all the refinements of modern homes that you would be familiar with in North America. But for the most part, the outer walls have remained unchanged. Many of the houses have a garage or sometimes a door that leads to a corridor, leading to an entry to the backyard. Invariably, that backyard is a private place to do barbecues and other private activities. But many times it extends quite far back and serves as a private little farm where people can grow their personal stock of fruits, vegetables, and sometimes raise their own chickens, which potentially provides the family with meat and eggs. Sometimes people can grow more than their personal requirements and sell the excess produce to the local markets for cash. The island is, for the most part, an agricultural economy, and Santa Barbara is very much that.
Aloe trees. Aloe plants.
Plants.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
There's blackberries.
There's what? Blackberries?
all
Oh, yeah.
over the streets too.
Lucy was just talking about the plants that grow wild on the sides of the roads here. It seems that the aloe vera plant that is so valued for many health and medicinal properties grow wildly everywhere on the roadsides. There are also blackberries on the roadsides that are very tasty. I recall the first time I came to this island back in 1990. I remember Lucy asking me to stop our rental car by the roadside so she could show me the abundance of blackberries growing there. I fondly recall munching on these tasty berries until we had enough. Oh, if you stick around to the end, I have a very interesting personal story to tell you about how our first visit was abruptly cut short on this beautiful island back in 1990. There are a number of flower species that flourish and grow wild on this island. Depending on the season, you can find ginger growing on the roadside and in the fields. Azaleas also grow in abundance. You can often see hydrangeas growing in the fields and along the roadside everywhere. Actually, you can see hydrangeas by the roadside here now. Hydrangeas grow in such abundance on this island that they have become a symbol of the Azores. You can find them in a variety of colors, including white, blue, purple, pink, and red. The colors that you see on the roadside here are the purple variety. The color of the hydrangea flower is a litmus test of sorts of the soil in which it is growing. That is to say, the color of the flower speaks to the acidity of the soil in that location. The bloom's color is a natural indicator of the pH level of the soil. If the blooms are blue, for example, the soil would be acidic, whereas a pink or red bloom would indicate a more basic pH level in that soil. The hydrangea is unique in its ability to indicate soil acidity. The hydrangea plant is in such abundance that it has become a part of the culture. For example, the flower plays a central role in the annual festa that is practiced in all of the towns of the island late in the summer. I will describe the annual festa in my next video, in which I will be covering the festa at Santa Barbara. But for now, I would just say that the local people use the petals of this flower to line the main street in a very special way for the festa. Not everyone is happy with the success of the hydrangea growth on the islands. Many biologists have pointed out that hydrangeas are an invasive species that displace several local floral species. It is believed that they came to the Azores from Japan in the 19th century as an ornamental plant. Hydrangeas like a moderate climate and moist soil, so in the Azores, the species became very much at home very quickly. And actually, they blend in perfectly with the landscape. Unfortunately, though, their success has been at the expense of some more indigenous floral species. Also, it is believed by many historians that this plant was brought to the USA by migrants from the Azores, moving into US cities in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. In the mid-1900s, nearly 250,000 Azoreans migrated from the Azores into these cities. Many of them brought their favorite island flower with them. Today, if you visit some very prestigious areas like the Hamptons, Martha's Vineyard, or Nantucket, you'll see stunning hydrangeas in the immaculately groomed properties there, likely whose DNA can be traced back to the plants you see on this roadside. town of Cabuco. Cabuco is a parish registered under the municipality of Legua. The population of this village as of 2011 was 1,921 people. On June 22, 1670, concession to build a church was granted by Bishop Friar Clement Vieira during a period when Cabuco included less than 30 homes. The construction of the new church would not begin until 1846 under the direction of Father Cosma de Souza. The growth of this center was due to its connection and accessibility to the municipality of Legua. The area was positioned to create an industrial zone that channeled most commercial and manufacturing activities to the center of the island, thereby giving that area an opportunity for development. You may have noticed that we just passed 2 speed bumps. If I can add a note of Portuguese humor, I was recently told by a local Portuguese person that they have a nickname for these speed bumps. The locals call these speed bumps Polícia deitado. This translates to English as policeman lying down. There may be no police in sight, but they sure have the same effect as a policeman left lying across the road. Very effective in slowing down the traffic. May I bring your attention to the road sign pointing to Ribeira Grande and Rabo de Peixe. Well, Ribeira Grande is a municipality of which Santa Barbara is part. Following that sign will take us back home, guiding us to the highway, the Via Rápida, the fast way home. However, it is Rabo de Peixe that I want to talk about. Rabo de Peixe, translated into English, means tail of the fish. Rabo de Peixe was the original title of a recent Netflix movie, which was subsequently renamed Turn of the Tide. I'm guessing that Rabo de Peixe didn't cut it for them in the English world. Let's continue our journey to Ponta Delgada while I tell you about the movie series that was filmed in this local village not far from here called Rabo de Peixe. The movie paints the place in a very negative light, but hey, it's a movie. The Netflix poster reads, when a boat loaded with cocaine sinks off his home island, Eduardo sees a risky but exciting opportunity to make money and fulfill impossible dreams. Starring José Condessa, Ilana Caldera, and Andre Leitão, creator Augusto Fraga. The Netflix series is based on a true story with the expected little white lies and fabrications expected to make for an entertaining movie yarn. In 2001, a large quantity of cocaine washed up on the shores after a sailboat sank carrying more than 500 kilograms of cocaine with a purity of over 80%, worth over 150 million euros at today's street prices. Many villagers decided to try the drug, as they were not used to it, and the cocaine was so very pure, a significant number of people ended up in the hospital with an overdose, and some even died. Others started selling the drug for a bargain price. Anyway, watch the series. It makes for great entertainment and lots of shots of some great scenery from the area. Just take the portrayals with a grain of salt.
Okay, I promised to tell you a personal story about how my first visit to this island was cut short back in 1990. I think maybe this is a good time to tell you my little story. Well, back in 1990, that was the year that Lucy and I were married, and this is where we came for our honeymoon. I had never been here before, so I was so anxious to come and see the place where Lucy had grown up, the place that she had talked about with such passion. And Lucy, well, what can I say? She was anxious to introduce me to all her uncles, aunts, cousins, and some of her closest friends, introduce them to that tall, dark, and very handsome catch of a husband that she had just married. Well, I don't really know what she was talking about. I'm not that dark, a little bit too fair complexioned, to be quite honest. The original plan we had made in coming here for our honeymoon didn't quite materialize the way that we had planned it. Our plan was to come to the island for a week and enjoy discovering Lucy's early homeland, meet her Portuguese family here and explore the island a little bit, and then continue our honeymoon to mainland Portugal, in the Algarve, which is known for its touristy beaches and resorts. Although we were enjoying this leg of the trip, we were both looking forward to seeing the Algarve. The week on the island was coming to a close. We had just driven to the back hills, visiting a scenic lake called Lagoa de Fogo. It had become very foggy up there on the heights that day, and I remember driving down surrounded by clouds of fog. Tomorrow we were going to be departing from this island and flying to Lisbon, where we would get in a rental car from the airport and drive to the Algarve, which is a scenic 4-hour drive. Today, we still wanted to enjoy the remaining few hours here on the island. From the cloudy hills, we drove down to the beach, where the contrast of a sunny day awaited us at the Praia de Santa Barbara. We had planned to meet one of Lucy's cousins at this local beach for a picnic. We had a bottle of wine in the back seat and planned on enjoying it with the picnic with our cousin. A nice, relaxing evening to wrap up this leg of our honeymoon vacation. I was driving, stopped at one leg of an intersection not far from our home in Santa Barbara, nearing the neighboring town of Ribeira Seca, waiting to go through the intersection. There was a big farm truck coming toward the intersection from the left. Was he going to turn right onto the road that we were waiting on, or was he going to be going straight through? I wasn't sure, so I patiently waited to be sure, to have the clear. Well, lights out. I woke up several days later, somewhere, I didn't know where I was, or how I got there. As I was waking, I became aware that there was a lady hovering over me, and by my side, calling my name. Kevin, do you know who I am? The lady kept repeating, Some time passed before I could collect myself enough to recognize who this lady was. Stick around for a short while and I will continue my story. I will tell you about the very concerned lady who was hovering over me, obviously waiting for me to wake up. I will now continue my story about the lady who was hovering over me at the hospital bed in Ponta Delgada. Yes, Ilana, I was finally able to speak, realizing that the lady hovering over me was Lucy's sister, now my sister-in-law, who was still back in Canada. Well, not quite. When she found out about the accident, Ilana got on the next available flight and flew from Toronto to Sao Miguel to help us pick up the pieces. After I had regained some awareness of what was going on, Ilana explained to me a little bit about the accident. I had sustained considerable injuries to the left side of my lower body. The 3 major bones of my left leg had been fractured, as well as my pelvis. My abdomen had been stitched up to repair some injuries there as well. I was scheduled to go into surgery to realign the bones properly and have them screwed together with the required pins and screws to allow them to heal together properly. It was explained to me we had been hit by a large farm truck. Apparently, a local farmer was teaching his 15-year-old son how to drive his large farm truck, illegally, needless to say. Remember that intersection that I was stopped at, awaiting the approaching truck? Apparently, that truck was making a right turn, obviously driving much too fast to make the right turn properly. He crashed into our little red Ford Fiesta and rammed it into the stone wall on our side of the road, crushing Lucy and I in the process. While I was regaining my senses, lying in the hospital bed, Lucy was still unconscious and had different types of injuries. Her diaphragm had been fractured, her right knee was injured, along with some injuries to her forehead. In a short while, my bed was mobilized so I could move to see her. I believe the hospital caretakers understood that we had been on our honeymoon and were very compassionate toward us for that reason. After my bed was maneuvered into Lucy's room and adjacent to her bed, she woke up temporarily as I spoke to her in my still limited capacity, and shortly after she slipped back into an unconscious state. I went into surgery and soon after was advised of a new dilemma. While I was in surgery, there had been a malfunction in some of the equipment, so they prepared me in a body cast with the intention of flying me back to Toronto, where my required surgery on my left leg would be performed. I was quickly prepared for the next available flight and secured on a stretcher. I was then loaded across 3 seats of first class in the jetliner, where I was accompanied by my sister-in-law, Ilana, and an attending nurse. They would not allow Lucy to fly at this time because of the nature of her injuries. Her injured diaphragm might cause breathing complications on the flight, so she would have to stay here to heal before returning to Toronto. Lucy would be there almost a month before they would release her for her return trip to Canada. So that's my story in a nutshell. About our honeymoon vacation was cut short in 1990. Oh, remember that bottle of wine that we had in the back seat for the picnic that we had planned on the beach with Lucy's cousin the day of the accident? Well, stick around for a minute and I'll tell you about how that bottle of wine survived the accident and came back to us many years later.
Coming up on the left, you will see Igreja de Sao Roque. Igreja, of course, is the Portuguese word for church. As in most villages on the island, the church is the focal point of the place. This church, Igreja de Sao Roque, is prominently overlooking the ocean and the beach called, of course, Praia de Sao Roque. Here it is now on the left, the beautiful little beach called Praia de Sao Roque. Sao Roque is a civil parish in the municipality of Ponta Delgada. The population in 2011 was 4,932. It was originally founded in the 16th century. The first documents referring to Sao Roque date to 1563, according to the Azores archives. The place was described as a village of country homes of a few citizens. My impression from this is that it started out as a cottage country of sorts in those much earlier days, serving some of the more affluent residents of Ponta Delgada. Speaking of which, Sao Roque is located on the coast just a little east of Ponta Delgada. Actually, we're not very far from Ponta Delgada now. We will be driving through the streets of Ponta Delgada very soon, so a little more patience please, and we will soon be there. Lots of aloe vera plants.
Two packs.
Música, tradição, exposições, festival 7 e 7 Luas, taça de jazz e muito mais. Destaque para Pedra Pinhosa e cantonês de dias 28 na Vila do Rio e Jorge Paulo no dia 23 em Portugal. Organização do município de Almeida e informações em CNS. Estás preparado para a festa do ano? Festa do ano. Para que estamos a a música é uma explosão de podcast. Festa de música, fizemos no dia de dias. Faz que estar lá. O que é que está à espera? Não vai ter tempo de viver um salto ao baixo e a raciona de comida não sabe se
Carol, Mara tem aqui alguns conselhos para o teu primeiro dia de aulas. Escolhe uma atividade extracurricular, um pequeno intervalo, mas está atento das aulas. Não deixes os difíceis para a última. Claro, leva um boneco com confiança e snack. Vais ver que te ajuda.
Still in St. Roque. Julieta.
now continue my little story about the bottle of wine that had survived the accident that unexpectedly punctuated our first trip to San Miguel and interrupted our honeymoon. There was a lovely couple that I had met while I was there. Victor and Fatima were Lucy's friends from her years past, before Lucy had moved to Canada. We had been to Victor and Fatima's house for dinner earlier in the week. I remember that Victor had roasted a chicken, cut up into pieces, on a barbecue of burnt wood coals in his backyard for us that day, on a stone barbecue that he had made himself. The dinner was delicious, and the hospitality was just wonderful. Victor and Fatima had heard about our accident and promptly rushed over to the site. In the demolished red Ford Fiesta, the rental car that we had been driving, Victor spotted the bottle of wine that we had intended for the picnic on the beach that day. He retrieved the bottle from the wreckage and vowed that he would hold it for us until we were able to return to his home and open it with him. 11 years later, on our 11th wedding anniversary, we did just that. After taking the bottle from his shelf, nestled between a couple other bottles, Victor told us his story about how he had retrieved the bottle from the wreckage. He told us about how a number of times several people had been to his house in the 11 years that had passed, suggesting that they opened the bottle. Victor, remembering his vow of saving it for us, refused each time. That evening, Victor opened the bottle of wine with pride, and we all enjoyed it together, following a nice dinner that they had prepared for us on our return visit to their home. It was an emotional yet enjoyable time for us all, the most memorable way we could ever imagine of celebrating our 11th wedding anniversary, a celebration that had taken on poetic tones for us. As a footnote to our little story, we have never up to this point in time ever gotten the opportunity of visiting the Algarve on mainland Portugal, or as the islanders there call it, O Continente. But since it was an unrealized part of our honeymoon, it remains a very prominent nugget on our bucket list. Well, one day soon, God willing.
Com licença, pode parar na próxima parada? Obrigada.